Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about some NBA players that actually didn't sign extensions yesterday. There was, of course, a lot of news going down about whether it be Jonathan Isaac, Markelle Fultz, Derek White, a handful of guys that signed new extensions before the deadline went up yesterday. But now we're going to be looking at some players that are going to go into the summer of 2021 as restricted free agents. That are 5 really interesting players that did not sign their extension. And we're going to talk about what that means for them as well as 2021 free agency in this video. But quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day, so it is a great place for consistent NBA content. You can also leave a like rating on the video as well. Helps me out a ton, lets me know that you're enjoying the content, and helps it get out to more people on YouTube as well. And you can hang out with me at various socials at the bottom of the screen. There are a link tree down in the description below. But with those things said, we'll go ahead and go through this in order. The first 4 we're going to go through relatively quickly, and then the last one I think is the most interesting here. So the first one is Jarrett Allen of the Brooklyn Nets. There were some rumors that they were starting to make some progress on extension talks, but realistically, this Nets team is in a pretty tough situation financially prior to signing Jarrett Allen to an extension. He only makes a couple $1 million this year, but next year they're already committed to $155 million in payroll, and the only thing that would change that is Spencer Dinwiddie's player option of like $11 million. So if that doesn't, that really doesn't change that much for them, right? So like Dinwiddie opts in, they're at 155. Dinwiddie opts out, which I think is more likely at this point, given the salary cap space of 2021 and the limited free agency possibilities for a lot of teams. He opts out. They're still sitting, over the luxury tax. They're at like 143 million, and I know that the team, wants to spend, but if you're looking at a double-digit, millions extension for Jarrett Allen, if you're looking at like 3 years, 35 or 40 million or something above that, it's going to get pretty tough financially for this team pretty quickly. I don't know if that necessarily means that there's a Jarrett Allen trade in the works here this upcoming season, or if they think they're just going to be able to figure out a new deal for him in the offseason, or just see what happens in restricted free agency. If a team gives him a big offer, maybe they let him walk. But I'm not necessarily surprised at this one, given that annoyingly, DeAndre Jordan is still the starting center of this team, and they've got other options as well coming up with guys like Nicholas Claxton that they can kind of fill out that backup 5 role if they need to, if Jarrett Allen does walk this offseason. Next up, though, Lonzo Ball, another player that has a lot on the line this upcoming season. He also will be going into restricted free agency in the summer of 2021. And I wasn't surprised that they weren't able to come to terms on a new deal, because I'm sure that Lonzo Ball thinks that he can bet on himself, have a really good year this year, and sign a bigger deal in the offseason than the Pelicans were willing to give him right now. That happened with Brandon Ingram, where they offered him an extension when he showed up to New Orleans in the Anthony Davis trade. He said no, and now he has a max deal. Lonzo Ball is not going to get a max deal in free agency this offseason, but he should have a good year, and he should earn himself a pretty nice contract, whether that's from the Pelicans or a different team in the offseason. It's a similar thing to Jarrett Allen, where the Pelicans are still kind of trying to wait and see what exactly Lonzo Ball is going to provide them in the short term and in the long term before they really commit a significant amount of money to him. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up signing like a $15 million a year deal at the end of the season if he has a really good year. If he has just kind of an year, then that number is obviously going to be significantly lower. It's interesting that he is not re-signed, but not necessarily surprising to me. Next up now, the third player, we'll actually group these next 2 together. It's going to be Zach Collins and Lauri Markkanen. And both of these guys had moments in the beginning of their careers where they looked really good. I'd say Markkanen looked way more promising than Collins, but both have really struggled, whether it be just to be on the floor or with their play over the last 1.5 to 2 years. And that's especially concerning for players that aren't going to be great on the defensive end. And if their offensive stuff is really dipping, whether that be a confidence thing or whatever the case may be, that's definitely a concern. Markkanen seemed like a guy that this time 2 years ago was in line for a pretty significant extension, and now is going to have to kind of earn that this year, and then same thing with Collins. Last up, though, we got to talk about this guy. John Collins did not sign an extension with the Atlanta Hawks yesterday. This one isn't necessarily surprising, because I think there's a few different ways that this goes. Either Collins puts up great numbers again this year, they make the playoffs, and he maybe has a case to convince the Hawks to give him a max or a near max deal in free agency this offseason, or the Hawks have a bit of a disappointing year. Collins is good but not great, and they're looking to trade him at the trade deadline, or they're willing to let other teams make offers that they could potentially match in restricted free agency in that offseason for John Collins. It didn't seem like there was a ton of motivation for either the team or the player to really push for an extension right now. There's upside for Collins in terms of raising his value, and the Hawks are still kind of trying to wait and see how he fits with all these new players that they brought in And the fact that, I mean, they've got a backup plan in Danilo Gallinari at that 4 spot if they did want to trade John Collins at some point this season. That's something that I've anticipated in a couple of previous videos where, you know, it seems like maybe the writing is a bit on the wall that Collins will not be an Atlanta Hawk a year from now, but I don't know, maybe he has a great year, and maybe they're more willing to pay him than I thought that they would be, but he is definitely an interesting one that still has not signed his extension, and I think of all the players on this list, I think him and Jarrett Allen are most likely to be moved to a different team prior to their 2021 restricted free agency, and they're also probably going to be two of the more sought-after restricted free agents out there as well, which brings us now to kind of the overarching point of this whole video, and that is, does this add value to the summer 2021? Because we saw a lot of guys get signed yesterday. Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac, Derek White, OG Anunoby, continually taking more and more players out of that 2021 free agency class. And typically we don't really account for restricted free agents a ton, other than someone like Bogdan Bogdanovic that, you know, is a really, really good player, but not quite a max guy. But there's a couple of candidates now, again, specifically Allen and Collins, but really everybody on this list that could be real threats to actually leave their team in restricted free agency. Again, similar to how Bogdan Bogdanovic did, because there's going to be a ton of cap space and just not a lot of options to throw your cap space at in terms of real veteran players. And typically, you know, restricted free agency basically just means that if a player is good, they're going to stay with their team for, you know, another couple of years. We've seen guys like Kyle Kuzma, Karis LeVert. We talked about this in a recent video where typically if you're not a max guy, you sign a pretty significant deal. Those players come back to their incumbent team, and then they go into free agency like 27, 28 years old when they're fully in their prime. But I think that this does actually add some to that 2021 free agency class because of the circumstances of these players, where their teams would like to bring them back, but only if they're really providing them a ton of value. And whether that's the case or not outside of someone like John Collins is still up in the air and it's still in question. So it's possible that we get to the end of the season and, you know, the Pelicans are looking at the Lonzo Ball situation thinking like, yeah, he's good, but we don't want to pay him $15 million. And, you know, Orlando or some other, you know, guard needy team makes him an offer and they're like, okay, that's fine, you can have him. And they become real players in free agency in a way that restricted free agents haven't really been involved in a while. Like I said, other than the Bogdan Bogdanovic situation, typically when we're talking about free agency, we're talking about unrestricted guys. But in the summer of 2021, these guys are going to be a significant part of what's happening in that particular summer. In terms of what I think is going to happen, some kind of prediction here, the safe bet here would be that these guys are going to stay on their incumbent teams and they're going to figure out a new contract or match a contract that is offered by another team. But it's also possible that, you know, there are teams that get excited about these younger players, or they've been planning on having 2021 cap space, and 2021 rolls around and they don't have anywhere to spend their space, and they end up throwing a huge offer at someone like John Collins or someone like Jarrett Allen. Any of these players could have really, really good years this year and really raise their value in that particular summer, and that would be something that I would keep an eye out for. So at the end of the day, this isn't necessarily a bad thing or a negative thing for either the players or the teams that they did not, come to an agreement on an extension. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the team doesn't want to keep that player, that the player doesn't want to be there. It's just they're both kind of banking on how this season's going to go, and the players are betting on themselves to raise their value, while the teams are thinking they're going to have a solid year, but not a year that's going to be worthy of a huge contract from them or from any other team, make it easier for them to retain them in restricted free agency this upcoming summer. So keep an eye on these 5 players throughout this season, how they're performing. Is someone like John Collins contending for an all-star berth, or are his minutes and his stats and stuff going down as a result of bringing in Danilo Gallinari and Bogdan Bogdanovic? Is Jarrett Allen a critical part for the Nets, or is he kind of falling behind DeAndre Jordan? Can Zach Collins and Lauri Markkanen figure it out and turn around their careers a little bit here? And then is Lonzo Ball going to solidify himself as the starting point guard of the Pelicans, or one of the starting guards beside Eric Bledsoe? All those things are things to definitely keep an eye on in terms of the value of these guys in free agency in that particular summer. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. If you missed the video earlier today, I talked about the Orlando Magic and the extensions that they signed with Jonathan Isaac, Markelle Fultz, talking about what that means for their future moving forward. Again, uploading twice a day, every day. So if you guys missed that previous video or any of the previous videos, you can check out the boxes on the screen or just go look at the channel. There's a ton of NBA content out there as we get ready for the start of the NBA season tonight, which is super exciting. Like I said, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day. Once again, my name is Tucker, and I will see you all next time.